When I told my children years later that I was bombed on my 21st birthday, they thought I was drunk. They didn't. Bombed had taken on a different meaning. A sister came and sat on the bed at night and told me, "You will never have any children. This is it." This is just an English expression meaning pretty nice. That's about it. I'd come home from Bletchley to spend my birthday with my parents. We did get some days off now and again. And I caught the train to Euston and went to Herne Hill. And my birthday as usual, because, you know, every night we'd have to go into the Anderson shelter. Name for Anderson, he was a member of Parliament, and he invented them. They were thick corrugated iron, and you bolted them together. It was like there was a doorway here. And my dad dug a big trench in the garden and set it in there, and so you had to crawl down into it, and then he piled the earth back on top of it. And we were in there when the doodlebugs were coming over. There was a flying bomb, but it had an exhaust coming out, blue flame. And the flame, you could see it, and you could hear the noise. They shot them from France, and you could hear the noise and the drone, and then you'd watch them. And the minute the flame went out, down they came instantly, right down, and too bad if you were in the way. Well, that's what happened. I was bombed on my 21st birthday. We didn't get the proper food, and plus sleeping in the Anderson shelter, and we had an outside toilet which was a flush toilet. It was joined onto the house. Most houses in London had that, as well as the inside toilet. And that was still standing, so they had what they called a stopcock in the middle of the road, and you could go and get water from it. And it was cold water. And there you'd go in there, and you'd wash down in cold water, you know, and put your clothes on again. And you didn't have many clothes, and even clothes were rationed. And so when I got married, I had borrowed a dress, and I got married in that. Anyway, then a few months after I was married, my husband was still there, hadn't been sent back to Canada yet. I collapsed one day, and they took me by ambulance to the hospital. And I was operated on by Mr. John Peel. As I said, in England, the big surgeons, they call them Mr. And so he was the one that delivered Charles and Anne. He was the teaching doctor at the King's College Hospital. So he performed the operation. After that, I was under the house doctor. And eventually, a sister came one night and she said to me, "They don't want to tell you this, but you'll never be able to have children." And so she said, "I know of a midwife in Chichester, near Singleton, near Chichester, who has just delivered a baby girl, and they need a home for her. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but," she said, "I'll give you the address, and you can write to them." Well, I did, and when I got out of the hospital, I could barely walk, but my mother looked after the baby. Anyway, my husband and I travelled to Chichester, and then we went to Singleton, to this cottage. In those days, if a girl had a baby, it was a disgrace, and so they shipped her out to somewhere like that. She came from London, and her mother said, no, we can't give. Her mother was kind of upper class, and she said, no, there's no way we can keep the baby. You have to give her up. I thought she was pretty hard, but anyway, we took the baby, and the girl came to the station with us, and I got into the carriage with the baby, into the train for London. And my husband, I looked round, he's on the platform with his arms round this girl, and she's sobbing and crying, and I felt terrible. So did he. Anyway, we took the baby home, and my mother looked after it, and till I was able to. And then came the shock. You can't just take a baby out of the country. It's nobody can. You have to be domiciled. We went to social services, well, they called it welfare then, to one place to another, and different courts, the lower courts, and they all said, no, you'll have to give the baby up. You can't just take a baby out of the country. So anyway, the Canadian Army got us a lawyer, and we eventually ended up at the Bailey, Old Bailey, and Sir Lawrence Dunn, who was one of the Nuremberg judges, and he came into the court, he came into his room, his chambers, with his wig on, and he looked at the baby and he said, knobby little chap, isn't he? Of course it was a girl, but anyway, he read the license and looked down, and then he brought his seal down and signed it and said, there, that make you happy? And I had a license to take the baby out of the country.